Hi everyone, my name is Yuri, those of you who don't know me. I was asked by my Russian-speaking community, by my Russian-speaking audience to give this speech in English, so I'm going to try to do it and satisfy the wishes of my audience. I was born in the Soviet Union, and my parents immigrated here when I was a young teenager. And we immigrated because we were refugees, because we were Jewish and we were prosecuted and oppressed in the Soviet Union. I had no chance of going to the university there. And my parents, after 6 years of trying, got out of Russia, out of Soviet Union, and we ended up living the American dream in the United States. When we got here, after a few years, a couple of years really in high school, I realized that this is the greatest country in the world. It still is, and it would be an honor to serve in the military, to defend. Being of a Soviet background, the only way you can defend your motherland is by joining the military and take up arms in defense of it. So I joined the Marine Corps, but I ended up in the Navy because I felt so strongly to defend this country against the evil empire. At the time, President Reagan called Soviet Union evil empire, and it was evil. So today, I don't want to talk about black and white and racism and what's going on right now. Enough of it's been said in the mass media, on internet. I would like to talk about history which we have never learned from. We keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Now I'd like to draw several parallels between what's going on in our country right now and what was going on in Russian Empire in the beginning of 1900, late 1800s. How it all developed, how we ended up with the Soviet Union, how we ended up with this Gulag system. You see, in 1917, a little bit over 100 years ago, there was coup d'etat in Russia, and the Bolsheviks, the communists, took over. Now, it didn't happen overnight. It probably took maybe 50, maybe 70 years for it to develop. It started out probably after the Napoleonic Wars, and some of the Russian intellectuals were going through the renaissance, sort of renaissance, and they realized that there is such thing as liberté, Napoleonic ideas, and few officers got together and tried to lead a revolt in 1824 called Decembrists. They were crushed by the Tsar. What they were trying to do, or they were saying trying to do, they were trying to fight the tyranny of the Tsar, the dictatorship, and they were trying to free the slaves, the serfs, which were slaves, except they were Russians themselves. And they were trying to create equality and justice for all. But of course, they were crushed by the Tsarist forces and all this. But several groups remained to be intact, and several groups continued to go and work undercover. And there were all kinds of different groups. There were some groups that were violent, some groups were just aggressive, some groups were very liberal and benign, more philosophical ones. But the most aggressive, the most violent group was called Bolsheviks. And Bolsheviks eventually created coup d'etat in 1917 and took power of Russia and created one large gulag and killed, what they say now, almost 100 million people. 100 million people. So how did that happen? How did that happen? The Bolsheviks, it was kind of foolish because the Bolshevik in Russian means a majority, but in a sense it's not a majority. They were a minority group. They were a very, very small group, but very violent group, using terrorist tactics. Kind of like Antifa, anti-fascist, right? But in a sense they are fascists because they use fascist techniques. The brown shirts, the stormtroopers, they are what Hitler used, those useful idiots, young idiots that go around and create fear among the people, terrorize the population, burn and destruct everything on their way. So I want to just point out that these kids that are doing this, firstly, most of them are not black, I don't believe. Most of them, I believe, are white, what they call privileged college kids. And I'll get back to it. So the leaders are probably organized. The leaders are well-financed. The leaders are organized, have it Black Lives Matter, and I think that by now Black Lives Matter Also, there are black people that care about it, about black lives. There are a lot of white people that care about black lives. But the leadership there is using them. They're part of it, not all, and I'm not going to be politically correct, but some of them are just thugs. Some of them are not for black lives, and it had nothing to do with black lives. And they're organized by very tricky, very mean individuals. Lenin, the Bolshevik #1, was not a peasant. He was not a factory worker. He was a very well-educated, foreign-educated lawyer. If you take Trotsky, the one that built the bloodiest army, the Red Army, that on its way would create scorched earth, that wipe everything on its way, killed a lot of people, the Polish, Finns, Baltic states. Trotsky was a philosopher. He was a Jewish philosopher. He was a journalist. He was a publisher. He wrote a lot of books, a lot of articles, all on the subject of justice, on the subject of freedom, on the subject of fairness and protection of poor people. So, but if you take Stalin was a priest. He was just not ordained, but he did finish seminary. So he spoke several languages. He robbed banks and killed people, and eventually he killed a lot of people. But his idea was, again, he was robbing banks and financing all this in the name of people, in the name of proletariat. You take the guy who set up the bloodiest organization, bloodiest in the history of the world, Inquisition and even Gestapo, hard to compare. It was a KGB. His name was Felix Dzerzhinsky. He was a nobleman. He was a Polish nobleman. To be fair, one of the henchmen who followed him was Yagoda. That guy was a pharmacist. So those of you who know me know what I'm talking about. That's to be fair. So, we can go to Fidel Castro, who was also very well educated lawyer. We can go Pol Pot, the guy that was also a lawyer, educated in France, killed half of his own population. Those people are not peasants. They're not workers. They're not people they want to be or pretend to be to create a utopia and great life for the poor. They're murderous maniacs. Che Guevara, whom we also now have a fashion with the berets, with the t-shirts, with the Che Guevara, charismatic, good-looking guy, brave. That guy was a maniac. The way he had fun is by shooting kids in the face or raping kids in front of their parents. That's what we make a fashion out of now in a statement. So I can go on and on telling you about these people who are leaders of those Bolsheviks or Antifa or whatever radical organization there is or part of the organization that is radical. Now, how did it happen in Russia, to get back to it? It happened with a peaceful protest. Peaceful protest to create better life for the poor, create better life for the factory workers, to create better life for the peasants, to give them free education, free medicine, public housing, all familiar, right? Who did that? That was done, those peaceful demonstrations were created by the university students. At those days in Russia, to go to university, you had to pay a lot of money. They were from a very well-off families, what we call today probably white privileged kids. And they went on demonstrations because the professors who were educated and who were looking in the West and saying this is how it's done in France and in Germany and this is what we need to do. And these kids, on the streets, and they were trying to protest and they were printing, they were educated. So, but those protests eventually got infiltrated by the Bolsheviks and by other radical groups, and those ones, Antifa, you can call them, and they started to create chaos. They started to beat people. They started attacking the police. They started burning businesses and loot. They were, of course, joined by the convicts and the thugs and the drunks and all the rest of it, the garbage of the society. And of course, it's lost its point. It lost its idea. The cause was lost. So the students would, because police would fight back, the students, it was a chain reaction. So they all would get into a fight, and there was violence. And everybody wanted to protest more violence, and they created more violence. So the police couldn't deal, because the police in those days in Russia, it really was kind of a peaceful force. They were patrolmen in a sense, but they didn't even have weapons by and large. They had sabers. So they had to call in the reinforcement, let's say the National Guard, and those were Cossacks. Cossacks were aggressive. They looked aggressive. They had horses, they had whips, and the Cossacks dispersed those demonstrations, and they arrested those agitators and hooligans and thugs, and they turned them to the authorities. But the authorities were already by that time liberal. They wanted to be European. They said, okay, these are college kids, their parents are good people, they're engineers, they're doctors, we got to let them all go, we shouldn't punish them too much, let them go back to the university to continue to study and learn something that they will never apply, except demand some rights which they don't know anything about. So the Cossacks would catch them again, the thugs and all this, and then, well, there were reforms by that time. The reforms were like, you can't really punish them. Kind of a bail reforms. Familiar? Bail reforms, you let them on, they go right back. And even the terrorists, even the ones that killed people, assassinated people, assassinated government officials, all they were exiled to Siberia. They weren't even in prison, they were exiled to Siberia, like Stalin and his kind. But you know what? They were roaming around freely there. They continued to read, to print, to agitate, and sometimes they would even come back and continue to do what they were doing. Sounds familiar? So that eventually led to the situation where you had to identify an enemy number one. And the enemy number one was identified: police. Police that brutal, the police that was the Cossacks, the gendarmes. They were the brute, they were the enemy, and they were demanding to disperse them, to defund them. And eventually the government gave in. By that time, the Tsar was overthrown. There was no more tyranny. There was a parliament freely elected. There was a prime minister type of elected, Kerensky, Alexander Kerensky. And they were demanding to disperse the police, because the police was Tsarist police. It was the tyranny of it. So eventually did it. But who's going to replace the police? Because the chaos is on the street. People are getting raped, mugged. Businesses are being robbed. It's dysfunctional. And yet the war is going on, World War I. So they said the ones that will patrol the streets will be the revolutionary armed sailors. Revolutionary armed sailors will really pick the best ones out of them. They were the drunks and the ones that disrespected the officers and the ones that got weapons, and now they could rape and pillage. And actually they were joined by the convicts and by the thugs that are on the street, because now they're free to do whatever they want to. Sounds familiar? Because Black Lives Matter today demands that the police would be defunded and dispersed. And what are they going to replace them with? With their own militia, armed militia that will be patrolling the streets. I don't want here in Miami them patrolling the streets. And who the hell are they? I don't understand. What's the difference between them and us? That's us. I spent 30 years in the military. There was no them and us. We were all together. I can't even remember who was black or white. We were all together. I mean, there were some black idiots, there were some white idiots, but by and large, we were a brotherhood. And to me, it's bizarre what is going on. So now these armed revolutionary sailors are going to be patrolling the streets. I'm sorry, that happened in history. It doesn't work. So, and yet the politicians, they don't want to offend anybody. They want to be politically correct. I just seen, I knew I promised I wasn't going to talk about it, but I'll say I just seen a picture where there is a policeman that got separated from his force, and there's a chain built by black men around him. They build a wall around him, protecting him from those thugs and those hooligans that are destroying their neighborhoods. And guess what? I don't see many black faces attacking that, whom they are protecting from. It is white college kids. Stop it. You've done this before. It doesn't work. Che Guevara is not a hero. Did not give people justice and freedom and equality. So is What else should I say? That the funding, how does the funding comes? Because, you know, from somebody who spent a lot of time in the military working on terrorism issues and fighting anti-terrorism, I can see that this is not just simply, you know, just happens. You know, it's just people got this, few kids got together and they're a little bit. No, it's organized. It's organized and it's well financed. Who's financing this? Who's financing? Yeah, the Lenin was financed by the Germany, and but, you know, and we probably hear the Chinese financing it, and the Russians are financing it, or trying to organize in a social network, creating programs to put the blacks against whites, against Latinos, Republicans against Democrats. Maybe they're all doing it too. I'm sure they are. But you know what? Russian Bolsheviks were not financed from abroad by and large. They were financed by within. They were financed by the magnates, by the oligarchs, by the richest guys in Russia, like Sava Morozov. You can look him up, Sava Morozov. He was an oligarch, and he gave a lot of money to Bolsheviks to cause all this destruction. Why? Because he was making money on it. He was quietly making money, and he was buying himself an insurance from these from the Bolsheviks, so they don't touch him, don't touch his businesses. But he happily died, I think, in France, so it didn't affect him. They all left after the coup d'état in 1917. So who's financing these guys? Well, I come to find out that well, we'll find out hopefully who financed the Antifa. But Black Lives Matter, you know, all of a sudden, Cisco gives them $500 million. Don't quote me on the number, but it's millions and millions of dollars. Why? You know, what are they doing to promote and progress the lives of African Americans? I know the programs we have in the military, it works. But what do these guys do? I don't understand. Airbnb gave $1 million to Black Lives Matter. I know I'm not being politically correct now. Not all Black Lives Matter are bad guys. A lot of them are good people. The ones that made a wall between a policeman and the thugs to protect him. A lot of them are calling in to stop this disorder, to stop this subversion and agitation. But some of them are radical. The ones that want to patrol the streets armed, I think that's radical. Those drunken sailors, Russian. So, and then PepsiCo is coming out with PepsiCo Revolution, Pepsi Revolution. That's all we need is a revolution, and also is giving money. Why are these multi-international, richest company in the world are financing these people? Why? Why are they financing the coup d'état in the United States? Well, of course, why? They want to be portrayed as they're fighting for justice, for equality, for fairness, to treat all people equally. But in a sense, they want to get rid of President Trump. They want that economic war against China stopped because they have their plants and factories in China that uses practically slave labor, practically legal slaves. These people work for nothing. It's okay there. It's okay there to use the child labor in Vietnam, in China, wherever. They have their interests. In Arab countries where their interests of their oil and gas. It's okay that they mutilate women there and abuse them. It's all right. But it's okay that they use a prison slave labor there. And that they kill gays and abuse people. As long as, but here in the United States, they're going to look like they're for justice and for equality and for treatment everybody is equal and for free housing and free medicine and free education, just like the Bolshevik was prospering. We're going to pay for all this. Bullshit, it doesn't work. It's a trap. It's a trap. We lived through this. Now, sure, my buddies, my shipmates, my brothers in arms, all good Americans, a lot of good Americans. The Americans that I love, the Americans that I wanted to be like that American. They're going to tell me, Yuri, calm down. You have this Soviet PTSD. We're armed. We're American people. We're armed, and we will protect our property and we will protect our people. Well, you know what? In Russia, they were armed too. As a matter of fact, the Bolsheviks were the ones that weren't armed. But the officers that came from the front, it was World War I going on, they were all armed. The soldiers that were the army of deserters, they were all armed. The Ukrainians, they were all armed. The Poles, they were all armed. Didn't work. Didn't work because they were refusing to shoot the civilians. They were refused to shoot the people that were out in the streets, that were protesting. And we will too. So I kind of miss Soviet Union because when there was a Soviet Union, there was this fear in our country against the Marxism or Leninism or communism or progressiveness, call it whatever you want. It's all the same crap. It's all the same crap, calling for justice, equality, calling for treatment of everybody equally, but in a sense, they're all going to put you in the gulags. You're going to live in a communal housing and be quiet. You're going to go to school and study what they tell you to do. And you're going to go and be treated by a doctor, whether he's qualified or not, the one they tell you to do. And I don't want to live like this anymore. My parents gave up their life so we would come to this greatest nation in the world. And I'm going to protect it. I don't care if you think I'm a racist. I don't care if you think I'm being unfair. I don't care. There is no other hope in this world but the United States of America. And all they want to do is get rid of the guy they did not expect to win. They did not expect him to win. So the establishment, the corrupt establishment, let it be Republican, let it be Democrat, they want to get rid of this guy. And the only thing we can do is not an armed rebellion or protect our president. The only thing we can do at this point is go and vote and prove that the American people want to preserve America, that America is number one. We're Americans, it's number one. So anyway, I hope everybody has a great summer, great weekend. Captain Yura, over and out.